I think if anybody's read my stuff,
purposely making yourself be a cock, but it's the idea that you're willing to, for some, to be perceived that way is a key thing.
Hello and welcome to episode 336 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. It's Saturday the 22nd of August. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a full-time B2B CMO, and I hope you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. The intention of this podcast is to inspire your inner marketing rockstar, and for this week's dose of marketing street knowledge, I'm going solo to discuss the 4 Ps of the CMO according to Jon Evans, host of Uncensored CMO, and Robert Rose is back in the bar to discuss the idea that for anything to be truly good, there must be love in it. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word. We'll be right back.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Energía baja, falta de concentración, niebla mental. You might be dehydrated. Gatorade Zero Powders han sido diseñados científicamente para ayudarte a mejorar el balance de hidratación en el cuerpo. Hechos con la mezcla número 1 de electrolitos sin colores ni sabores artificiales. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Signos de dehidratación leve y moderada. Consulta a tu médico si los síntomas persisten.
Today I'm going to talk about Ps and which 4 Ps CMOs should be paying attention to, according to some recent work by Jon Evans, the experienced CPG CMO, formerly with System 1 and now host of the popular marketing podcast Uncensored CMO. As you know, marketing and advertising have a love of the letter P, specifically the original 4 Ps, product, price, place, and promotion. Those very familiar 4 Ps come from the 60s. E. Jerome McCarthy introduced the 4 Ps classification, having refined some earlier work by Neil Borden on the marketing mix concept. And incidentally, I love the fact that the very familiar concept of the 4 Ps was refined from something we talk about today that predates it, the marketing mix. Evidence that we marketers should probably learn our history. It would save us a lot of time making new shit up. Anyway, I've digressed. Back to the 4 Ps. Over the years, various marketing commentators have tried to extend the 4 Ps, thinking about the operations behind product, price, place, and promotion, and what we do, extending them to the 6 Ps by adding people and process, or the 7 Ps by adding physical evidence, which frankly I had to look up, as physical evidence seemed a bit of a contrived P to me. It seems to be packaging, point of sale, and all of the physical things that happen with the sale, which obviously is slightly different with online and with us in B2B. I'll also include an amusing article in the show notes, a link to an amusing article in the show notes in Marketing Week by Mark Ritson, which I think was back in 2021, and his opinion on people that want to reinvent or extend the 4 Ps. There's some really good history in there about the 4 Ps and where they came from, but also, if you read Mark Ritson, you can imagine what his opinion is, and it's quite amusing. I'll include that in the show notes. Now, back to this. If we do agree on these 4 Ps, then there is a debate about which of these the CMO actually owns or should own, as all of them are levers for revenue success, and ultimately the success of anyone in the revenue department, as I like to refer to sales and marketing, including us, the CMO. Now, clearly, this is more of a consumer thing on a shelf thing when you see a lot of the conversation around the 4 P, but it's applicable to B2B. How many of us own price when it's such a fundamental part of positioning? The pricing of something can change how a product is architected, how it's taken to market, whether it's a product-led growth type of motion and therefore a different marketing motion, or whether it's something that's more enterprise scale and needs sales and marketing in that manner. Price is going to make a big difference there. And I've written about this recently. But really, I mean, I've just picked on one, their price. We can own a bit of product with product marketing, but we tend to be given just one of the P's, promotion, which limits our influence on the revenue outcome and ultimately on our success. But on that topic of successful outcomes, Jon Evans, who I mentioned earlier, the host of probably the biggest marketing podcast at the moment, suggests that the CMO's success is also dependent on a different set of 4 Ps. The first of his Ps is politics, navigating the organizational hierarchy to understand how decisions are actually made, which pulls on the thread that Kathy and I were talking about last week about understanding how shit gets done beyond the org chart. So as a CMO, you need to come in and see how things happen. His second P is people, which shows up in the extended 6 Ps that we mentioned just a moment ago. And he talks about identifying talent and nurturing them, specifically about having a team you can trust and delegate to. If you don't delegate and you get too involved, you'll just burst their bubble and micromanage them into mediocrity. And performance is something that, Jon talks about a lot on his podcast of the team. Listening to his podcast recently, I heard an interesting idea on the spin-off podcast that he has called Uncensored Renegades that he does with Corey Marchisotto, the Chief Marketing Officer of Elf Beauty. She talks about identifying the types of people you need on the team, specifically when you're looking at growth. And there's a lot of talk about how Elf Beauty has done something like 39 consecutive quarters of growth. So it's a real sort of case study of growth there. And she talks about 3 kinds of people that we have in our teams: adventurers, tourists, and prisoners. In her view, adventurers are the ones you need to grow, based on the view that what got you here won't get you to the next stage of growth. So you need that ambition to discover. You need these adventurers who are going to push the envelope. Tourists are just happy to be here. It's better than where they were before. And they might get a bit complacent and not push hard enough. So we need to nurture them to become our next adventurers, but also look out for if they're going to turn into the next category that she talks about, which is prisoners, as she describes them. Those are trapped in the status quo or believe that things were better before. And I think we've all worked with folks like that, which is they do things because they've always done them, or they believe that that some kind of circumstances have changed and it was better before and it's worse now. And that's our barrier to growth. Now, clearly that her advice is to motivate the tourists to be adventurers, not prisoners, and to move the prisoners on. I'm not sure if I follow this completely, but I quite like this idea that, we need to identify when we come into a CMO role, what's the team that we've got in front of us, and are they going to be able to take us to that next step? And it's a nice shorthand, isn't it? Adventurers, tourists, and prisoners. So that's 2 of Jon's 4 Ps, politics and people. The third is planning, owning the vision and providing the air cover that allows your team to work without interference. As you know, we talk a lot about planning here. Our 5 effing B2B marketing fundamentals are mostly about planning. As a CMO, understanding the goals and needs of the business, which is probably blended with a bit of the politics, as Jon referred to, is critical and foundational to everything we do going forward, especially in that first 90 days. And as Jon says, that foundation creates air cover. And when he's talking about air cover here, normally in marketing, we talk about air cover as in, the brand and the kind of campaigns that we run that support sales and marketing. But in this case, you're providing air cover to your people for when it comes to making decisions. If everybody knows the plan and why we're doing things, what our objectives are, what our metrics are, then obviously decisions can be made more confidently by people further down the chain than yourself. And his 4th, so that was planning. So his 4th and his final P, and sadly, it doesn't conform to our editorial policy of 5 effing things on this show, is persuasion. Constantly framing marketing in business metrics that the CFO and the board can get behind. And we've kind of talked about that in planning. And obviously that's part of our 5 B2B marketing fundamentals that we talked about. And personally, I'm a fan of OKRs, objectives and key results, as a way of framing that. If the C-suite can define the objectives, you can agree how these are measured and create a process in which all the activities and the team and the individual, the team goals you set, the individual goals you set, and the tasks that we're looking at and the projects that we're running can ladder up to something that is understood by the business. So why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this. Let's take my framework, for example, which is that we need to raise awareness, revenue, and trust. If all of the things that we're doing ladder up to, this creates more awareness, or this creates more revenue, or it creates more trust, then people can understand that, because those are very understandable objectives. And you then recognize that you're not doing some sort of random acts of marketing, that each one will actually compound and contribute towards whatever the goal is. Now, it may be that the organization you work in has a different set of goals. I'm just using the ART framework as an example. But if we can sort of look at which marketing activities are rolling up to those, then that OKR model works really well for that. And in my time in the sort of CMO roles that I've done, I definitely relate to all four of these. I think this is a really good set. And obviously it is because Jon's talked to 250 plus way better and bigger CMOs than me. So if you've been, and I think the other thing about these four, especially when you've been brought in to bring change, which we often are, getting these four right, especially in the first 90 days, could define the rest of your tenure. So, and on that point, and again, dipping into this podcast a little bit further, in the latest episode of the Uncensored CMO podcast, Jon chatted with Najo Tita-Reid. She's the former Chief Growth Officer at Mars Pet Care. And they were talking about these 4 Ps, and she made an interesting analogy. If you don't pay attention to these 4, then she described it as a new CMO coming into an organization like an organ transplant, that you can be rejected by the organization, by the antibodies that are trying to protect it from change, as you're seen as a threat. And I've certainly felt that in previous roles that I've had, as sometimes it doesn't matter that the CEO that hired you wants change and growth. If the organization isn't coming along with you for the ride, it's going to be tough. So I think that understanding these 4 Ps, politics, people, planning, persuasion, can overcome that feeling from the business that you're a threat, and this antibody kind of immune system kicking in and ultimately rejecting you, right? So those are the 4 Ps of the 4 Ps of the CMO, according to Jon Evans. And following his conversation, as I said, with over 250 leading CMOs, and just to repeat them again: politics, people, planning, and persuasion. If you're not familiar with the Uncensored CMO podcast, it's very B2C focused, but I think it's well worth a listen. And it also won the Marketing Podcast Network's Podcast of the Year. And I'll include a link to that in the show notes too. You may not realize, but Marketing Podcast Network, Rockstar CMO is part of that. And recently they ran some awards, and Uncensored CMO won one of those, as did a bunch. This show got nominated and we made it into the finals, but didn't quite win a gong, as it were. Anyway, that's enough of my solo rant for now. And of course, I'll include all the links to all the episodes and articles that I referred to there in the show notes. It's amazing what you can do with words that start with P when it comes to marketing. But joking aside, I hope you found that useful, as the chief bit of CMO seems to dominate the role these days, as it's less about getting your hands in the dirt of marketing, the M bit, but about creating an environment and buy-in to enable good ideas to get done. And whether that starts with P or not, you decide. Right, it's time to wind down in our virtual bar, the Rose and Rockstar, and join Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at Seventh Bear, as I pick his brains over a classic cocktail.
My friend, and welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much, mate. And how are you doing?
I'm doing remarkably well, actually.
Jolly good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fighting a never-ending summer war against ants at the moment. We've got ants in our house, which is which drives my wife absolutely crazy. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, everything is great.
It's interesting because it's such a tiny little beast, and yet my wife's the same. She hates the sights of them. The traps have to go down, everything needs to be done to clear those buggers out.
We have a whole situation. We got the diatomaceous earth making a border on the floor around where they can go. And then we have the traps and the taro baits and all that stuff. And it's quite a battlefield.
Are they meaner in California? Are they more bitey or anything like that?
No, they're the little baby. No, they're the baby what they call Argentine ants, which are the little small ones. So they don't even bite. Yeah, they're not the fire ants that you get in Texas or anything like that. But they're just little tiny. But they're everywhere. I mean, not everywhere. Wow. They're in one particular place, but there's a lot of them. Right? So they make a big line between the bait and the thing. And yes. You have sort of you have surges, right? You have the big surge, and then it gets quiet, and then basically the internet says, no, don't take the traps away because it has to be 72 hours before you see no ants that basically you can take the traps away. And then, of course, another surge comes. So we've been through 4 surges so far. So.
Oh, my God. But also a more logical animal to be scared of. You also had a snake interaction a couple of weeks ago that I haven't asked you about as well, didn't you? I saw on Facebook.
Yeah, well, that was pleasurable, right? Because those are I fucking love snakes. I think they're cool, and I love having that kind of wildlife in the backyard. So it was a red racer, which a red racer is a very long, thin, and super fast snake, and they sort of stand up like cobras do.
Oh my God.
And they look out, so they just look so cool. Because they have red and they're kind of red stripe and basically, and you're never going to catch it. It's a non-venomous, but so you don't have to worry about that. But and you can't catch it because as soon as it sees you, it takes off. And they call them red racers for a reason because they are super fast. But they're the good guys. They eat the rats and the bugs. Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to know, though, I would imagine, if you don't know your snakes. I mean, it sounds like quite an intimidating beast.
As long as there's so here in Southern California, as long as there's not a rattle at the end of the tail, then you're all good. Basically, it's pretty much the only poisonous snakes we have. Or venomous.
Well, fantastic. Well, while we, I don't know how to do the segue, but I guess we need a drink once you've seen a snake.
Snake our way into a cocktail. Yes, exactly. So we have a really wonderful one tonight. It's a blackberry mojito. We've had mojitos on the show before, but tonight's a blackberry mojito. Very fruity twist on the classic mojito cocktail. Basically, you need to muddle some fresh blackberries, which this time of year should be easy and plentiful to find just about everywhere, especially there in the UK. And then some mint leaves, of course, a little lime juice. I skip the simple syrup, which everybody puts in, but I just skip it because the lime juice and the blackberries are just fine. A little club soda. And of course, rum. You need the rum in there. And basically, you mix all that together to a white rum, by the way, not black rum. White rum here, 2 ounces was good. Stir that all up with the, shake it if you like, whatever you want to do. But basically, you're going to strain it because of the muddled blackberries. Strain that into your glass with ice cubes, and put in your club soda, and it's all good, and it's fantastic summer cocktail when it's hot outside.
Sounds very refreshing. I guess the straining as well gets rid of the little seeds out of the blackberries too, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's what you want. That's what you want. And you can actually do a big picture of that if you like, because it's it's a little bit of a homework assignment to get the blackberries going and muddled and all that kind of stuff. So if you're doing 3 blackberries, you might as well do 10, or 20 and make a little picture out of it.
Yeah. Get the work out of the way first, and then relax.
And then you're just drinking all night, right?
Fantastic. Well, the question I've got for you today, and there's a little bit of a long running because I need to explain it a little bit, but I've pulled something from your podcast a couple of episodes ago, episode 545. This Old Marketing, of course. People, when you finish listening to this podcast, please go listen to it. And it was actually a quote from Joe, but when I heard it, I thought this sounds like something you would say. And he pulled a quote from a book he's reading called Theo of Golden by Alan Levy. I'm not familiar with that book, and you probably are because you're very well read. But in the quote, the lead character says, "For anything to be truly good, there must be love in it." And then he went on to make the point that perfect content may come down to 2 questions. Does creating it take care of you? And does it take care of someone else? And I know it's a point that Joe made, not you, but I thought it came straight out of your playbook and was very much the antidote to this debate that we've been having about whether something's AI or not, or whether we should care, and all of that stuff we've been talking about. And I actually used it in a thing because I was saying, if you write something and it gives you the feels, it's not slop, and it doesn't really matter how it got there. What did you think of that idea? Because I heard it in real time when he was sharing it with you, and it sounded like you loved it. So
I did love it, and it because like most of Joe's ideas, he steals them directly from me. So
I assume so. Yes.
Yeah. It's pretty much the way it works. We actually talked on the show about this. Maybe it was a year ago. I lose track of time on this, but
yeah,
I talked about one of my favorite ways to distinguish the importance of your content and what you're creating is, you may remember this as soon as I say it. I said there is content that is created and content that is constructed. And that comes from a critique of Dickens, actually, back in the late 1800s, where G.K. Chesterfield actually is the one critiquing Dickens and talks about this idea of created content versus constructed content. And he's using, obviously writing, but it applies to music. It applies to, poetry. It applies to novels. It applies to just about anything that you would do.
Yeah.
And the difference is, the created is loved before it exists, and constructed is loved only after it exists. Right. And the classic example is, a poem or a song, right? Which is in your head before it exists. You love it. You love the thing, and you want to bring it to life because you love that thing. And you're putting that effort into it. And it is what is, by the way, the self-satisfying part of the creation of that thing. Constructed content can only be loved after it is constructed, right? In other words, it's not that it's any better or worse than created content, but it is the street sign, right? It is the it is the manual for the product, right? It is the thing that you create, or that you construct rather, because there is an end goal in mind. There is ultimately a consumption end goal in mind, and you construct it. And then after it's constructed, it can be as loved, but it's not loved before it exists. And so those are the two differences. And that's what it immediately reminded me of when he said that. Because, well, the other thing that it reminded me of, and we've talked about this on the show before as well, which is the Rick Rubin thing, where Rick Rubin says in an interview in 60 Minutes, he says basically the audience comes last, right? And he said basically everything that I do, the audience comes last, because if I'm not happy with it, then it doesn't go out, right? If I don't love it, then it doesn't go out. And that's what I make it for. I make it for me. And if the audience happens to also like it, then that's great. Now that works. All of those things work great if, and where it's useful as a tool, especially in marketing. If we're in marketing, communications, and advertising, there are those two distinctions are important, because not everything can be art, but not everything can't be art either. In other words, when we start thinking about the created content, the company's not going to pay us for something that we love that nobody else loves, right? They're not going to, that beautiful sculpture that we want to make in the middle of the yard is not going to be that which drives leads or that which, puts, money on the table. However, it's not that we can't do those things either, but it's understanding the distinction of why you're creating the thing that you're creating. And that's ultimately what Joe is getting at, which is if you're a content creator, understanding that distinction is the important piece.
Exactly. And I also thought it pulled at something else we've been talking about, and certainly something I'd written about, which is that the journey of writing, you shouldn't outsource to AI, right? Because it's a learning journey for you, isn't it? And I think that's the first part of his quote is where he's saying, does creating it take care of you? And I think that developing an idea through writing is incredibly fulfilling. Getting AI just to create something is not.
That's right. Yeah, and in fact, when he brought it up on the show, the thing I brought up was something that I wrote, a while back, with regard to my book that I wrote with Carla Johnson, the book Experiences, where I opened that book by talking about something my grandfather used to say to me all the time. Is he would say, "What experiences have you created for someone today?"
Yes.
And the reason for that, which I finally understood after years of him telling me this, was when you create an experience for someone, you also get to have the experience yourself.
Yes.
And so in a very selfish way, creating nice, good, valuable experiences for someone is a very self-satisfying process because you actually get to have the experience. And that's one of the reasons to do it, if not the reason to do it, is because you get to have the experience yourself and then you get to give it to someone. And that's ultimately what Joe is getting at with that quote is that by loving the thing before, and what you're getting at with your quote is the idea of not letting AI do that is what allows you to have the experience of the creation, which is a very fulfilling, or can be a very fulfilling process. However, I would also say that not using AI doesn't mean that you can't have that experience using AI, right? In other words, if AI helps you do something and pressure tests an idea or bounces off or helps you phrase something in a more clever way that you want to do it, you can have that as a tool. It can help you have the experience yourself. So this is what gets to the, ultimately created by AI, created with AI, or created without AI. None of those distinctions really matter.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've all posted, and the point I was making with this, and this is why I like the "it must have love in it" part of the quote that Joe shared, is because that's vulnerability, right? That is, if you're going to put something out in the world and say to sort of coin Seth Godin, "Here, I made this," you're somewhat vulnerable. And I think if you strip out all the vulnerability of the piece by making it really safe, and it doesn't matter whether you used AI or if you just wrote some really dull B2B content, it's slop, right?
Yes, 100%.
It doesn't matter how it was authored,
And that also reminds me of something that you wrote about years and years ago. I mean, your blog title was the hovering over the hovering over the publish button, or hovering over the
hovering over the back button. It used to be called
which is the fear that we have, right? That's that fear that you have before you hit publish. That, have I been too personal? Am I wrong? Am I, are people going to call me out? It's that sort of both imposter syndrome as well as sort of the willingness or unwillingness to have that vulnerability of putting my ideas out into the marketplace of ideas. And that takes courage, right? And it's very easy, to your point, it's very easy to say, let's pull out all the places where I, make it as vanilla as possible, so that no one would basically come back and say, you're wrong about this, or this was stupid, or this was a bad idea, or how dare you do this, right? And that's, of course, all of those, one of the things I used to tell customers all the time is, like, when they're creating marketing materials, is in order to be right for someone, really right for someone, you have to be willing to be wrong for someone else.
Absolutely.
And that is, that's part of, that's what you're signing up for, really, as a content.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. I mean, I talk about, making a bit of a cock of yourself, and that's my kind of litmus test. That's the line. And I think if anybody's read my stuff,
purposely making yourself be a cock, but it's the idea that you're willing to, for some, to be perceived that way is a key thing. Go out of your way to be an asshole, but
But yeah, I mean, that's just me proving that I'm not AI. But I mean, when the
the funny thing is that that's what resonates these days, right? I mean, in other words, one of the things that we've seen, and this applies to the broader landscape of modern media. Like, look at the news media. I mean, the old saying used to be, if it bleeds, it leads, right? But now it's really, if it's provocative. I mean, something should rhyme with provocative, but basically, everything you see is some clickbaity headline, because that's what gets attention, and that's a sad state of our culture. But in many ways, it sort of rewards being an asshole.
Oh my God, we could carry on talking about this for a while, because one of the things what we're talking about, and it's your point about pointy bits. You need to have your pointy bits in there, but you can sometimes see when somebody's trying too hard to have pointy bits. You're like,
oh yeah. There's a show here in the U.S. that airs I think it's every night. It might be once a week, but I believe it's every night. I don't watch the show because it's just I can't stomach it. But it's basically a show where two people from the hard right, basically from the Trump MAGA world, sit on a panel on the news show with 3 or 4. They're outnumbered by those on the left. And the entire show is built around the two right-wingers saying something incredibly horrible, right? And then them arguing about it. And the cynical nature of it before you even tune in, right? I mean, it's something like, slavery wasn't really that bad. It's like literally something like that, right? And then and then they argue over it, right? And then so that's what gets the eyeballs, and the cynical nature of that, which the reason I don't watch it and I can't stomach it is because you can see it, right? You're not even hiding it, right? It's like he doesn't really believe that. He's just taking the opinion to be provocative, and because he's getting paid to be overly provocative, and sit there in front of the firing squad and be the heel, right, in the wrestling match. And it's that whole theater of outrage is just so awful, and it's but it's where we are.
Oh yeah, and they're playing for clips, aren't they? They're playing. Yeah, they want it being clipped up.
They're playing for the and that has bled into the legislative process, where all of the hearings in Washington these days are not about getting to better policy or getting or vetting someone for their nomination for some position. They are all just theater for those that are participating in it to get their clips out on YouTube. Or TikTok or whatever.
I think that's the state of politics. But anyway, to go back to where can we find content that not only took care of you, Robert, but also takes care of someone else? Where can we find that?
You'll find that at our website, which we've been much better about updating, which is seventhbear.com. Yeah, we've been good about that.
And your newsletter? Still
newsletter is it's called The Lens, and I forget the URL for it, but
rrlens.com.
Thank you very much. rrlens.com. I have the summer has been not good to me in terms of my cadence on that, and I need to get a new issue out, which I will be doing this weekend. And so Monday there will be a new issue out.
You published something on LinkedIn recently, which is pretty cool. So yeah. That was about the watermarking and AI, and that was really good.
Had more than a post to say about the whole situation. And on LinkedIn, if you have more than a post in terms of character limit, you have to go to
article. Really cool. Yeah. Anyway, and talking of LinkedIn, when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
They're going to find me on LinkedIn. Actually, it will be. I will be there trying to make that that cesspool a little bit of a better place. It's
nice, and
it's become the bastion of hot topic or hot takes these days, and it's hard. It's hard, but there are good conversations to have for sure.
Oh my God, there's so many things that you mentioned that because I know that you're short of time, and I know that, and I could talk to you about all of these things for so long. But will you be in the bar next week?
I will indeed.
I see you then, mate. Cheers. Thank you, Robert. And if you're interested in the idea we started discussing there, the one that Joe was talking about on their show, This Old Marketing, look up Joe Pulizzi and his newsletter called The Tilt. He also talks about it in a bit more detail in that, and I'll link to it in the show notes. So that's a wrap on episode 336 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. You can find links to our little band and the articles we discussed in the show notes, along with links to our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes at rockstarcmo.com, or follow us and join the conversation on LinkedIn. Next week, I'm looking forward to welcoming Jeff back from his summer off. I have quite a list of topics waiting for him, and Robert will be back in the bar. In the meantime, I'll leave you with this quote from Greg Hahn, co-founder of the Mischief Agency. The riskiest thing you can do is to be ignorable.
NFL football season is here, which means when you switch to Verizon, it feels like touchdown, because you get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube on us when you buy an eligible 5G phone on select unlimited plans, which means you can watch every out-of-market game every Sunday afternoon, and it's all on us. Now that's the Verizon way to kick off the NFL football season right. Switch and get NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube on us, only with Verizon.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.